Hi buddies! Welcome back, and I'm just gonna jump right into this. One of the best parts about making any D&D adventure is making a D&D adventure based off of a theme. When I say theme, I mean something that's based off of a real-world concept, or idea, or even culture that blossoms into whatever your overarching adventure happens to be. Whatever your theme is affects the ambiance, it affects the encounters you have, the creatures you fight, as well as the treasures you find. Now, these concepts and ideas blossom into fun adventures. My goal for this series is essentially for each theme to find out what to prioritize for abilities, what subclasses for the particular class to pick, as well as, just what potential creatures or adventures you might have. And I'm going to do this with as minimal homebrew as possible. Keep in mind, though, that I am not anti-homebrew. I actually love homebrew quite a bit. I do have strong feelings on when you should use homebrew, but that is a totally separate video, and I don't even know if I'm actually ever going to make that one. But besides the point is, the whole goal for this is to take whatever theme campaign you have and make it easy for you to know what to prioritize by background abilities or even subclass. This way that, you can go with a, good mindset, because a lot of the work's already been done for you via the people at Wizards of the Coast. So rather than make more work for yourself trying to homebrew things, why don't you try reading the books first? Therefore, you can, judge for yourself whether or not you want to use something from the book that fits the campaign setting, or if you would rather, homebrew your own thing. But before you do that, just make sure you don't have to make extra work for yourself, either being a DM or a player. Now, one last little bit of housekeeping. I think the word is housekeeping. Last little bit of housekeeping that I'm gonna say is that I'm gonna focus more on the 2014 with some mentions of 2024 versions as I get through this. There are more options than the 2014 version of D&D, but sometimes the 2024 versions has better options, and you can of course adapt as you need to. With that being said, let's get to our very first of this series, that being a Seafaring campaign. So when I say a Seafaring campaign, what I mean is a campaign that takes place over on the open ocean, ones that involve, exploring underwater, ones that have you visiting multiple archipelagos, which are groups of islands, or anything that has you going up and down a coast, or pretty much in entirety, what I'm referring to is anything that requires you to be on a naval vessel for at least the majority of whatever your adventure happens to be. Quests for this kind of campaign include things like, fending off pirates, defending merchants, exploring and discovering new cultures via the ocean, salvaging for sunken treasure, anything that has to do with the ocean or the seas or whatever major body of water you happen to be working with. It's like, most of the encounters you'll find are in the coastal section of the DMG, and I'm gonna be honest, the best way to think about these campaigns is to take inspiration from things like Assassin's Creed Black Flag or Assassin's Creed Valhalla, as well as Pirates of the Caribbean, The Princess Bride, let's think of another good one, Master and Commander, The Odyssey, and even the movie Atlantis. So as the players in this campaign, here are some of the backgrounds you should consider when making your characters for a Seafaring campaign. The first one, whether you're doing 2014 or 2024, it seems very obvious, is the sailor background. When you choose this background in 2014, you get the ship's passage feature, as well as, proficiencies with navigation tools, as well as water vessels or naval vessels. In 2024, you instead get the tavern brawler feat, as well as proficiency in navigation tools. Now, where sailor is probably the most obvious background to pick, it's not the only one that actually makes sense. In 2014, there's also the guild artisan. Considering that most of the jobs on a ship require an understanding and the ability and a trade of some kind, being a guild artisan comes in handy, whether you're a blacksmith, a woodworker, tailor, cook, just some form of artisan is going to be needed on the ship. And if you are one of those, you actually will have a role on that ship. In 2024, they've changed it from being called a guild artisan to just being the artisan and the merchant. There's one more background to consider, and just hear me out on this one because it works for either version, and that's the soldier background. The reason why I say the soldier background is if you consider a naval soldier instead of just a normal soldier, it works very well. All the features that you get from being a soldier still work out on the open ocean, but instead of, being part of the army, you're instead just part of the navy. As far as abilities goes, here's what your party should prioritize getting as quickly as possible. First of all, I would recommend having at least one or more members be proficient in navigations tools, so that way you can prevent yourselves from getting lost out in the open sea. In addition, I would say that each of you have like a different crafter's tools that you're really good at, whether it's like, cooking utensils, brewmaster's tools, tailoring, carpentry, blacksmithing, whatever. Something that would help help the group out while you're out on the open sea. In addition to that, getting a swimming speed is something that you should prioritize at all times. Because you're going to be out on the open ocean a lot, having a swimming speed prevents you from having to consistently make athletics checks, as well as prevents you from having disadvantage while fighting in the water. With that being said, it would not hurt to be proficient in not just athletics, but also be proficient with perception and investigation, simply because those are the things that you will be looking around, looking for land and finding the treasures, or just paying attention to anything that's going on. Other abilities to consider when choosing your subclasses is anything that has to do or is related to lightning damage and storms. Storms are something that happen all the time out on the open ocean, and therefore are a big part of the theme of seafaring. With all that set up, let's get into the subclasses. So, for the Barbarian, I think that the most fitting subclass is the Path of the Storm Herald. The Path of the Storm Herald is the Barbarian that gets its power via channeling nature while in rage. Now, the Storm Herald actually comes in 3 categories. One of those categories is called the Sea category, which, if you were paying attention to the theme of the campaign, is perfect. At level 3, whenever you enter a rage, you start doing lightning damage, which is one of the best damage types to have during this campaign, simply because most of the creatures you run into are going to either be vulnerable or have no resistance towards lightning damage. As you get a little higher levels, some of the creatures might have some resistance, but even then, it's few and far between. Now, on top of that, the most important ability is the one you get at level 6. This level 6 ability gives you 3 very important things. 1, the ability to resist the lightning damage, which means you enter a rage and you now no longer take damage from the storms that you'll probably be running into. On top of that, you get the ability to breathe underwater, so if you fall overboard, you're fine. And in addition to that, you gain a swimming speed. If you did not already have one based on your race, you now have one just based on your class, which is one of the most important things for you to have. This way, you don't have to make athletics checks anytime you want to go swimming or you want to go underwater. Then later on, of course, you can add on more lightning damage, as well as giving your allies resistance to it. And then its final ability, just, you enter your rage. If they take lightning damage from you, they get knocked prone. Where that last ability is kind of lackluster, this is still one of the most fitting things for a seafaring campaign. Plus, there's actually 2 ways to think about it. You can either be a barbarian on a normal naval vessel, you just, you enter your rage and can't be controlled. And if you consider the idea of being a Viking as a different form of seafaring, then this actually is not only perfect, but this is probably what most of the other barbarians in your vessel are going to have. Frankly, I don't think you can get it any more thematically perfect than this. Bards, unlike barbarians, don't really have a mechanically fitting subclass that fits with a seafaring campaign. Therefore, my decision is going to be based mostly on flavor. And the decision I've decided to make is the College of Lore Bard, for one main reason. That reason is sea shanties. College of Lore describes their bards as bards who sing the songs of tragic events of the past, as well as telling the stories of various heroes and lessons via the songs they sing. That being said, sea shanties are literally just that. Most of the sea shanties are either designed to help you work faster, which is actually what they were invented for, and they tell stories of other sailors and other sea voyages from the past. This fits perfectly within what a College of Lore bard is supposed to do. On top of that, cutting words is one of my favorite abilities, and if you do this in the pretext of a sea voyage, you end up becoming something similar to Captain Jack Sparrow with his insulting things, as well as Wesley when it comes to like the many comments he makes to everyone he meets. Ergo, purely for flavor, College of Lore bard. So clerics are in kind of in a weird spot because they do have a domain that fits, but it's a loose fit. The domain I'm referring to is the Tempest Domain Cleric. These clerics are described as worshipping gods of the sea and usually having spells that control the weather. When you choose this domain, your cleric gets access to the prepared spells of Fog Cloud, Gust of Wind, Call Lightning, and Control Weather, just to name a couple of the spells that you have prepared automatically just being in this domain. All of which makes sense because these are based off of like storm gods, and you're channeling the power of the weather and either controlling the weather to be fair or bad based on your seafaring adventure. Here's why I call it a loose fit. Where yes, storm gods are actually important for seafaring campaigns, the problem is that the gods that they give as examples are Zeus and Thor, as just two examples, neither of which are known as gods of the sea from their respective mythologies. Therefore, because of this, I am actually developing a sea domain cleric that if you want to hear about it, I'm going to actually be making a book. Let me know if you want to hear more about it in the comments below. But it does not change the fact that Tempest Domain actually fits. Being able to control the weather and whether making it foul or fair is just as important for a seafaring campaign as much as, just being able to control water itself. Therefore, I actually think that the Tempest Domain Cleric fits the best from the official texts. Druids are actually in a cool spot because they actually have multiple fitting subclasses for this kind of adventure. Let's start with 2014, and I think that the best druid you could be is a Circle of the Stars druid. And the reason I believe this is based on their level 3 ability, which is the Starry Map, as well as their proficiency in navigations tools. Because the entire idea of this particular druid is being able to read and channel the power of the stars, as well as being able to read them and navigate around. Navigation is a huge part of a seafaring journey, and out of all the 2014 subclasses, I think the Circle of Stars is actually the most fitting because of its natural inclination towards navigation. None of the other subclasses have this special feature. Not to mention, the Starry form provides some buffs depending on which story and constellation you use. And since constellations are constantly used and referenced in storytelling for sailors, it also is a good fit for this druid who can channel the power of the stars. Now, with that being said, in 2024, yes, there is still the Circle of Stars in the player's handbook for the 2024 version, but there's also another subclass that works, and that is the Circle of the Sea. In 2024, the Circle of the Sea gives you the ability to breathe underwater, as well as give you some stormy spells, kind of like the Tempest Domain Cleric, which includes Fog Cloud, Control Weather, Gust of Wind, Call Lightning, Lightning Bolt. And it also gives you like a protection sphere made out of the brine of the sea. Frankly, I don't think you can get any more thematically correct than the Circle of the Sea from the 2024, but I will say that in 2014, the Circle of Stars works the best as well. At first, when I was making this video and when I was doing the research for it, I didn't think there was going to be a particular fighter that would actually fit for a Seafaring campaign. But then, when I was researching for the Barbarian and thought of the Nordic Vikings as being seafarers, this got me to thinking there actually is a very thematically fitting fighter. And that would be the Rune Knight that you can find in Tasha's. The reason I say the Rune Knight is based off of its main ability, the Rune Carver, which gives you different abilities based on whatever rune you carve into your weapon, armor, whatever. And it gives you some magical effects. Now, the runes I would say to prioritize, because they fit thematically, would of course be the Fog Rune, the Cloud Rune, and the Storm Rune, which is a higher level rune. On top of all of that, you get the ability to speak giant. You also get the ability to somewhat turn into a giant, just being this particular subclass. And since literally from the book it says that you get your power from channeling giant magic, essentially, you could actually argue that you are related to a Jotun, or even a storm giant, or even a sea giant, or sea titan of some kind. And that's what gives you your power. And if you remind yourselves that, Nordic Vikings are seafarers, and this is probably the most thematically fitting fighter you could possibly play. So, when I was trying to figure out a monk subclass, after reading through most of the official ones, I kind of came to the realization there is no monk that has any specific abilities that have to do with a Seafaring campaign, or that would benefit during a Seafaring campaign. With that being said, kind of like the Bard, I had to consider flavor over mechanics. And I sat and thought about it and realized that there are two jobs on a boat that are very important, that being the Galley Master and the Brewmaster. The Brewmaster is what inspired me to pick the Way of the Drunken Master for the monk. Now, like I said earlier, this subclass does not give any major benefits when you're aboard a sea vessel or any form of sea combat. That does not make it a bad choice to pick. It's actually a lot of fun if you read some of the abilities for it, especially like just being able to just kind of disengage, like go, ooh. It's like you can dodge and disengage just kind of as a bonus action, and I think later on it's even a free action. But again, thematically, it fits very well. Most sailors actually have a love of alcohol, if you really consider, pirates, Vikings, and any sailors in general love their alcohol. And if you have one who gets more powerful when he's smashed, it's actually kind of funny. Granted, not the best, and strongest pick for a subclass, but it is the best one for the monk thematically. So, not my strongest case, but I still think it's a lot of fun. When I think of a Seafaring campaign, the class that does not come to mind is the Paladin class, which I will say may be just because, I always think of a Paladin as a heavy armored knight of holiness. But if you go into Tasha's and look at the Oath of Glory, you might be able to have an argument for these going on a seafaring adventure of some kind. My main argument for it are the Tenets of Glory, which I'm going to read to you now, and as I read them, I want you to think about working on a Navy vessel. Here they are. Actions over words, which of course every sailor lives by. Challenges are but tests. Think literally any sailor knows that if the sea is going to test you, and you have to rise to the occasion. Hone the body, because the work is long, hard, and rewarding. Yes! This is quite literally what it means to be a sailor, or even, a naval officer. And finally, discipline the soul. I will tell you right now, discipline is good for anybody, but if you are on a naval vessel of any kind, whether it's a merchant vessel, a, warship, it doesn't matter. If you don't have discipline, you're dead. So, all four of these tenets work for being on a naval vessel. On top of that, you get the spells Enhance Ability and Haste, both of which are really good and actually can work when you are applying this to like surviving a storm or, just getting around on the ship. The third argument I have is the channel divinity ability that the Oath of Glory gets, that being the Peerless Athlete, which makes your ability to swim a lot easier. Now, granted, not my strongest argument, but I do think it is the best Paladin subclass for a naval voyage. I'm going to put this as carefully as I can. The best option for a Seafaring campaign that you can pick as a ranger is the Beastmaster Ranger if you use the level 3 ability from Tasha's. The level 3 ability from Tasha's gives you the ability to summon a creature that can act on its own based on being a creature of the land, of the sea, or of the sky. And there are templates in the book that show how powerful these creatures are, and they can resemble whatever you want, but it does make the Beastmaster significantly better. But the reason I selected this is because, being able to call a beast of the sea at any point in time is something that you can take advantage of. Also, the flying one can help for, navigations and flying around. You can use it kind of like Noah and the dove. Again, maybe not the best thing to play during a Seafaring campaign, but I do think it is the most thematically fitting. I'm gonna say this right now. If you pick Rogue, it really doesn't matter what subclass you pick. Most of the Rogue subclasses you can argue for a Seafaring campaign. Like, all of them can fit. If I had to pick one that I think is the best, it's definitely the Swashbuckler. The Swashbuckler is quite literally the pirate subclass. Like, it was definitely inspired by Princess Bride and the Pirates of the Caribbean, as I can also see, a little bit of Assassin's Creed Black Flag in there. But, one, it's got some crazy cool abilities, epic fencing duels, and because the rogue itself just gets expertise, you can put it into things like perception, investigation, and athletics, to give you some boost in your swimming. But overall, just the rogue itself can be a seafarer. And I just like the Swashbuckler just because it is just the one that fits the best in my mind. Since one of the most common tropes in sea voyage stories is dealing with storms, it's only natural to say that the best sorcerer subclass to pick would be the Storm Sorcery subclass. Now, at first level, these sorcerers get something called Tempestuous Magic. And what that does is it allows them to, after casting their first level spell or higher, they get a 10-foot flight movement disengaged, which means I cast spell, I can immediately move without provoking an attack of opportunity 10 feet. And it's every time they cast a first level spell or higher. At higher levels, they get extra damage for lightning and thunder-based attacks, which, of course, are the main kind of attacks you want to use while you're out on the open ocean. And in addition to that, they get some minor weather control, and they get their own personal 20-foot cloud that they can use and summon and move around as they see fit, which can cause some extra lightning damage. And I did actually look this up. You can cast Call Lightning using this cloud, even if there is no, open air. So you get to use one of my favorite spells indoors. Then, once they reach higher levels, they gain a flight speed and even more lightning damage. So, frankly, all of that is really good for doing any form of sea voyage. Basically, you can turn yourself into Peter Pan with lightning. Since warlocks get their magic from a patron, the most thematically fitting for this kind of campaign would be the Fathomless. Now, in the description of the Fathomless patron, they actually discussed that it could be a kraken, a sea hag, an ancient water elemental, or a merfolk demigod. If you haven't noticed a trend here, those all live in the ocean. or sea, or whatever, body of water. Regardless, it genuinely fits thematically. It's like, on top of all that, it gets specific spells like Create or Destroy Water, Gust of Wind, Lightning Bolt, Control Weather, Summon Water Elemental specifically. Its first level ability allows you to summon this tentacle from nowhere that, kind of makes a splash when it comes and can attack people. Then it also gives you a swimming speed and the ability to breathe underwater, all at level 1. Those are like the most important things to have at a Seafaring campaign, and you all get it at level 1. That's amazing for a campaign like this. At level 6, you get something called the Oceanic Soul, which gives you the resistance to cold damage, which is another common damage type that I haven't talked about a lot, but it's also the kind of damage that the ocean itself will do to you. But it also gives you the ability to speak fluently underwater, which means you don't have to have a special item or a special, spell cast on you to be able to cast your magic while underwater. And then at level 14, you get a special teleporting ability called Fathomless Plunge. And how it works is you and your party get teleported into the nearest body of water as an escape trick. Personally, I don't think you get a better fit for a sea voyage campaign than this. It is so thematically on point that I actually think that it might be my favorite one out of all of the subclasses I'm going to talk about. Like a lot of classes, there's not one that is tailored to the sea or storm magic that wizards go through, simply because wizards get their magic based on the school of magic. Because of that, the school of magic I think best fits a wizard for going on a sea voyage is the divination school. The reason I believe this is because divination is about, reading the stars, reading the signs, seeing the future, reading omens, and being able to make the best decision based on, essentially, future sight. The second level ability, Portent, allows you to roll a set of dice, and then take the results of those and set them aside, so that over the course of the day, you may replace any other roll with the number you rolled on those dice. And its ability only gets more powerful at level 14. Now, the other thing to consider is the third eye ability, which they get at level 6. That gives them the wizard dark vision, ethereal sight, and complete linguistic comprehension, which is great for when you're trying to talk to other merchants, other sailors, and communicating with other, intelligent sea life. In addition to all of that, it also means that, reading, languages and, riddles, which do come up quite a bit with, any form of sea voyage, is actually kind of neat. Basically, by picking this subclass, you essentially become a magical version of Milo Thatch. And if you don't know who that is, go watch Atlantis: The Lost Empire. I'm gonna be honest, Artificer has 4 options, which means out of all of this, I have to just be flavorful no matter what I pick. So I've just decided to have, the Alchemist Artificer be the one I pick for the Seafaring campaign. It's not the best pick, but I do have a reason for it, and that reason is, of course, the potions and elixirs you make, you can, call them alcohol and just make your alchemist your brewmaster. Then you can pair it with, the Drunken Master Monk I mentioned earlier, so now you have someone who makes the alcohol and someone who drinks the alcohol. Alright, I'm grasping at straws here, and frankly, at this point in time, it's the best I've got. And there you have it, a complete guide to what subclasses to pick for a Seafaring campaign. If I had to make a party myself, I think I'd go with Tempest Domain Cleric, Lore Bard, Rune Knight Fighter, Fathomless Warlock, and Swashbuckler Rogue. But I really would like to hear what you guys think. Make sure to like and subscribe and leave some comments below. I promise I'll read them, and if you have any more ideas for themed campaigns, please let me know. I'm more than happy to see them and, consider them. With that being said, have fun!